So scales are one of those things to learn alongside actual music to support your playing. Like most theory things or exercises I'll talk about, there's massive practical benefits to learning and internalizing scales. When you learn something on piano, you need to know why you're doing it and how it's going to help you improve. It'll help keep you motivated and actually know what you should be focusing on whilst you're doing it to get the most out of it. I'll always explain that to my students when I teach them something new and in these videos for that reason. So why are scales important for piano and how can they make you a better musician? Scales are really just a certain selection of notes we use to make music with. We create melodies and patterns out of them, we get chords from them. Things can go out the scale too, but they're a solid backbone for how a lot of music works and where the notes come from that you're just going to use all the time. The most common ones are major and minor scales, which use 7 out of the 12 notes. So then you have to know where those notes are on the keyboard, which ones you can hit and which ones you can't for whatever scale you're playing music in. And you can start any type of scale from any of the 12 notes as well. If we look at major scales as an example, C major is just all the white notes, so that's easy to know and visualize where you can and can't go, just ignore the black notes. But the others all have a mixture of black and white notes and form really different wavy lines on the keyboard. They're more tricky to see, so they need practice. If we take E major as an example, just a major scale starting from the note E. If a piece of music or a song uses this scale, we basically move in and around the line that those notes make. Remember, we can repeat them up and down the keyboard. And we create everything from them. Like I said, you can go out the scale too, but you need the scale as a reference point first. When you're familiar with it and you can clearly see it, so it pops out off the keyboard and you can almost just ignore the other notes and you can lock into that line without going off course. Then when you learn a song that uses that scale, it's so much easier to play and remember what the notes are in the song and where to move next without making mistakes. You're comfortable going anywhere inside of it, and that familiarity means you have to think way less and it makes things a lot easier to play, however you're playing, by ear, improvising or memorizing something. But with reading, for example, you have a key signature which tells you which scale to use, and then the notes on the stave or staff go up and down the keyboard, locking inside that scale, so you have to know where it is first. After this, you should watch this video on a method for helping you to visualize all 12 major scales on the keyboard, which is really helpful for learning them, and I've got a worksheet linked in the description too with a list of all 12 major scales and finger numbers. Scales teach you and let you practice a core skill which you need to play the piano, which is basically how to use your fingers cleverly and efficiently. Without this skill, you get confused when you're playing and your fingers get stuck and jammed up when you're trying to move around the keyboard. We use finger blocks, which means we take a group or a block of notes we need to play and assign a block of fingers to those notes we can mold into comfortably. When we can't reach everything in one block, like moving through a melody over a wider area, we divide it up into chunks and assign finger blocks to each chunk and then move between them. So with a C major scale, there's 7 notes, so we divide them up. Fingers 1 to 3 for the first 3 notes. Then the next 4 notes we move and use fingers 1 to 4. Repeat the blocks to do another octave. And use finger 5 whenever you want to reach the top. So that block of 4, if we use these 4 fingers instead, then we'd be stuck and we wouldn't be able to turn very well to that C. So they teach you and help you build up muscle memory of using clever finger blocks in different shapes around the piano, how to divide something up into finger blocks so you can glide through the notes without your playing falling apart. Blocks where the notes are clumped together in seconds at least, meaning half steps and whole steps. But this is the important part I never really hear mentioned very often. Finger blocks are going to be different for lots of things that you play. So scales are one of the things that helps you teach the principles of how to find your own finger blocks efficiently. To learn more from practicing scales that you can apply to playing actual music, you shouldn't just learn to recite standard finger positions, but actually feel like you're making the logical finger choice yourself by looking ahead at the whole block in one go. For example, coming down the C major scale, when I get here, I look ahead and I see a block of 3 notes coming up. I know it makes sense to get my thumb back to the bottom so I repeat where I started, so I'm going to apply a block of 3 fingers and fit it into the block of 3 notes. A Apply that to almost anything you play, even shapes where the notes are more spread out than the seconds in a scale. Look at a block of notes coming up in one go and then find a finger block that allows you to reach all of them and move to the next one smoothly. It takes experience to get more fluent at it, but it's really useful if you haven't been given finger numbers or if you're improvising, and helps you struggle less playing anything you're memorizing too, because it starts to just feel more intuitive what to do. Once you can see the notes and the finger blocks, you then have to learn to move through them well. Practicing scales allows you to isolate and focus on some core techniques, which especially in the beginning is really important to start training your fingers. The fundamentals of how to hold your hands and control your finger movement properly, coordinate your hands together and learn to make smooth turns and movements between the blocks. But things like sitting position and posture too, and how to make good use of your arms and shoulders and everything in your playing. Lots of music has elements, particularly melodies, that might move a lot in seconds, which means when you build up some strong muscle memory and experience of what those movements feel like to play and how to execute them well, you'll play real music with far more confidence. Different kinds of scales and scales in different keys create different shapes too, so you get used to handling some of the more awkward positions your fingers might end up in. You can also use them as a practice tool to help you develop other areas of your playing, like controlling your touch for different sorts of sounds, smooth legato playing, short sharp staccato, working on your speed and your evenness and your timing with a metronome. You can isolate and concentrate on those things with scales and other exercises too, form good habits that then come out when you're playing actual music. So tying it all together, a scale is really a palette of sounds you can use to make music. When something uses a particular scale, it has the signature sound of that scale. Learning to hear music better and train your ears, I believe, is one of the most important things a musician should be doing. And learning different scales helps you recognize what palette of sounds a piece of music is using. A major scale and a harmonic minor scale have very different sounds. You can create infinite things from each one, but it will still be very much distinctive to that scale once you're familiar enough with the sound of them. Like a bright colour palette will result in a bright painting, and a dark colour palette will result in a dark one. They're both built with something called intervals, and to dive a bit deeper into that, you can watch this video next, because intervals are the core building blocks of music and you really need to understand how they work. I also have a worksheet on that linked in the description too. When you're learning scales, be sure to think about them as numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Then when you're playing music, be sure to pay attention to where in the scale things are happening, always keeping the root as your reference point. Numbers help visually, so keeping track of patterns and things. Chords start from different numbers of the scale, or scale degrees as they're sometimes called, but also you're learning something deeper about how music works, and your ears gain experience of what each number of a scale sounds like. When you're transcribing, which means working things out by ear, or composing and improvising, you now have a better idea of where to look for the notes that you hear, and it also then stands out if a melody jumps out of the scale. You know to look somewhere else now. You can practice by singing the scales, attempting to work things out by ear in a particular scale, or experimenting and improvising, and like I said, just paying attention to what's happening in music that you're learning. All of which you need to know your scales to be able to do. Hearing things that are happening in a scale and knowing how the music works has a huge impact on your musicianship, because it becomes part of your vocabulary. You recognize things, which lets you learn faster and memorize things more easily. Remember, I have this video you should watch next for a method to help you see all 12 major scales clearly on the piano. And I've got a worksheet linked in the description too, with all of them and finger numbers and everything. Please give the video a like if you found it useful, as that really helps out the channel, and subscribe for more content to help you develop your piano playing. Thanks for watching.